Hello and welcome to the Sidebar, presented by True Crime News, taking you inside the courtrooms of high-profile and notorious cases from across the country. I'm your host, Joshua Ritter. I'm a criminal defense lawyer based in Los Angeles and previously an LA County prosecutor for a decade. You can find me on all social media at Joshua Ritter ESQ or at joshuaritter.com. We are recording this on Wednesday, October 16th, 2024. In this week's episode, a woman's adult children testify against her in the ongoing murder trial for the death of her husband of 38 years. Plus, a mother of three on trial for allegedly killing her toddler son before throwing the boy's body into a dumpster. But first, a woman indicted on murder charges after allegedly killing, dismembering, and then cooking her mother. Today, we are joined by Matthew Tympanick, an attorney and founder of the Tympanick law firm. Matt is also a legal analyst you can catch on Court TV, ABC, and many other outlets. Matt, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me back on, Josh. Absolutely.
I love hearing your commentary on TV, not only because you have an interesting take on these cases, but also because you're a practicing lawyer who really understands the legal issues behind a lot of what we're discussing. So I know you've been looking at these cases. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Let's go ahead and jump right in. First, out of Mount Olivet, Kentucky, a woman has been indicted on capital murder charges for the gruesome slaying and dismemberment of her mother. According to police, Torilena Fields was apprehended at the home she shared with her mother, Trudy Fields, after the discovery of Trudy's dismembered body. The corpse was found outside the home with her head, hands, and feet all removed. A search warrant revealed the dismembered body parts had been placed in a pot and charred in the stove. Police say a blood-soaked Fields declined to exit the home until officers tear-gassed the 32-year-old before taking her into custody. An indictment in the grisly killing revealed that Fields had recently relocated back to Kentucky after suffering a brain injury in a motorcycle crash that left Fields wandering around California, apparently unsure of her own name. Fields had been in Los Angeles trying to pursue a career as an actor, where she adopted the alternate identity of Naomi Navir and even garnered a few screen credits. Fields had only returned to living with her mother for a few months before allegedly shooting the woman in the head, decapitating her, and eviscerating her remains. She has been appointed a public defender and is expected to be in court for a preliminary hearing on October 23rd. Matt, I don't know where to begin, but where do you start with this case? I mean, it's so gruesome. Is the only kind of pathway forward for a defense for her going to be an insanity defense here?
I think it really is the only avenue they have. Based on the fact that there was a search warrant done and then they were able to find the dismembered remains, I don't know if there's going to be many procedural defenses to be able to go at it. Your only real argument is to go for insanity. Remember, insanity only works 1% of the time. And to be able to do that, you have to convince the jury that they want to basically send you to a facility, because they kind of get an idea as like not guilty by reason of insanity or guilty of capital murder. And there's a huge difference. One is a death penalty eligible offense. The other one, you probably spend 20, 30 years in a psych ward under lockdown. So it is, as a defense lawyer, that it starts and ends with the insanity defense, because there really doesn't seem to be anything there. So I think that the insanity defense is really the only avenue. I don't necessarily think it's going to work, given that it's too gruesome and the jury's just not going to want to let her off. But I think as the defense lawyer, that's really all that you got.
You make such an excellent point about how reluctant jurors are to go along with the idea of an insanity defense. And I agree with you, certainly given the statistics you just told us about. But one of the reasons I think for that is that they think that many times it's a made up defense, that this person committed this awful crime and now they're going to say, oh, I was crazy. And you're going to, hear from a bunch of experts who said that, well, one time they drew some, awful pictures while they're on their notebook, a bunch of kind of patched together evidence of perhaps a troubled mental history. This case, though, is a little different because she had this traumatic brain injury. And we know, I mean, this is not an argument. This is just medical science, that traumatic brain injuries can lead to a person living an entirely different life that is unstable and untethered to kind of reality in the way that they were before. Do you think that that might bring some heft to the defense argument that, hey, listen, this isn't a person who had a troubled life. They were damaged, and then it turned them into this monster that committed this act?
It would all really depend how the defense attorney presents the case. Can you make a monster seem sympathetic? Think of right now what's happening in Los Angeles. Everybody's talking about the Menendez parole situation. It's how do you make monsters, or ones you perceive to be monsters, seem actually human? That's the defense attorney's job here. And using that brain traumatic injury, that's going to be a situation where they're arguing, the defense attorney is going to be arguing, it's like, yeah, like you said, they really aren't the same person they were before. If they were that same person, they wouldn't have committed this crime. It's definitely going to be interesting to see how defense lawyer can humanize the defendant here. That being said, I think that what a jury ultimately we're going to do is, if they do seek the death penalty, because it is a capital case, I think a jury using that traumatic brain injury would simply just sentence her to if they were given the option, they would choose life without parole. I think that's where that traumatic brain injury is going to most play into mitigation. I don't really think that's going to be used to excuse an insanity defense, but I think it will mitigate any potential death sentence.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. It's hard to punish someone with the greatest punishment we have in this country when it doesn't seem like they were playing with a full deck. Not to be so dismissive of it, but it sounds like this was not a person who had their entire control of their faculties. Last question on this. I live and practice in Los Angeles, California. You live and practice in Florida, and I know that you just survived 2 horrific storms, so we're glad to hear that you and your loved ones are safe and healthy. But this case is taking place in Kentucky, very different from both of our jurisdictions. It's a rural area in Kentucky. Do you think a jury picked from one of those rural type areas is just simply not going to be sympathetic to all of this psychobabble nonsense?
I definitely think that they're not going to be sympathetic to the point where they return an NGI verdict, which is a not guilty by reason of insanity. But I definitely think in this day and age, juries have been much more sympathetic to mitigation when considering what a sentence should be. If there were to be I believe it's a capital case, and I believe they are seeking the death penalty, I don't think even in a rural community, based on if this traumatic brain injury is introduced and discussed extensively at sentencing, I think even the most Bible-thumping, law and order rural individuals from Kentucky will not be able to find it in their hearts to be like, I don't believe this person deserves to die for this. I think this person deserves at worst to spend the remainder of their life in prison for this. Because at the end of the day, it has been objectively much more difficult to have the death penalty imposed in this case in the United States across the board. It's because people nowadays don't want to play God. They are looking for any reason, even in the most irredeemable human beings, to be able to find some semblance of humanity. Look at Nicholas Cruz. He was given life without parole. There was a serial killer that I covered, I think in Daytona Beach when I was on Law and Crime. He also got life without parole. So you think about, these are 2 people that it's like, these are irredeemable people, but a jury was able to find humanity. And I think with that traumatic brain injury, a jury, and even the most conservative, even in the most pro-death penalty parts of the country, will find it in their hearts to spare that individual's life.
You might be right. Well, there's a lot of this case to still be heard. Like we said, she hasn't even gotten to her preliminary hearing yet. So we will continue to watch it, continue to keep tabs on it, and continue to update you all to its progress.
Whether you're whipping up a meal for friends or just trying to make a healthy dinner, there is no reason to cut out carb-heavy foods that you love. Hero Bread has fluffy, delicious flavor and texture with no net carbs, 0 grams of sugar, and fewer calories, plus protein and fiber. And now you can try their sweet, melt-in-your-mouth Hawaiian rolls. But my personal favorite happens to be the flour tortillas. I love those because I love to make eggs and put some sour cream in there and then just wrap it up and have that for breakfast. Plus, they have something for every craving, including sliced bread loaves, buns, tortillas, and you can also try their mouth-watering limited edition bakes like the popular 2-gram net carb Hero Croissant. You don't have to compromise flavor with Hero Bread. Get 10% off your order at hero.co and use code TRUECRIME at checkout. That's TRUECRIME at hero.co.
Let's move along to Chatham County, Georgia, where trial is underway for a mother of 3 accused of killing her toddler before throwing the boy's body away like trash. Leilani Simon is facing a total of 19 charges for murder, concealing a death, falsely reporting a crime, and lying to investigators. Simon reported her 20-month-old son, Quentin, missing in October of 22, which led to a weeks-long search before the boy's body was discovered. According to police, Simon's story changed constantly throughout multiple interviews with investigators, which her defense had fought to keep out of the proceedings. After initially claiming the boy may have walked out of an open door, investigators say Simon eventually made a tearful admission saying, "I don't know if I did something to him. If I did, I will take responsibility." Prosecutors allege that Simon got into an argument with her boyfriend the day of Quentin's disappearance before leaving the house to buy cocaine. They claim that while under the influence of the drug, she became irate, striking the boy with an unknown object before disposing of his body. Simon's defense was brief in their opening statement, maintaining that the state was jumping to rash conclusions that could not be proved beyond a reasonable doubt. Trial is ongoing, and we will update you as the case unfolds. Matt, a alleged suicide video was recorded by Simon and shown in opening statements, in fact, by the prosecutor, that shows her incredibly agitated, incredibly upset, and she's obviously kind of saying goodbye and talking to loved ones about how it sounds like she's prepared to go take her own life. She obviously did not, but the prosecution was using this to show this heightened emotional state that she was in, pushed to the brink by her own love life, and then in her drug-fueled state killed her toddler child. But I'm curious, how do you think the defense might use this to their advantage, or can they at all, this videotape?
It is very difficult. So we're talking kind of a 180 of what the case we just did. We have somebody who is accused of killing their child. What I can tell you in my experience is prosecutor, criminal defense attorney, juries have no sympathy for child killers. They just don't exist. There might be some situation where there's mitigation, but no jury is going to not want to be like, what's the worst we can give this individual? And with this, you have somebody who was clearly acting all agitated. And I don't know how much the defense is going to be able to use this, because it clearly shows like, all right, I'm going to take my own life. And that shows consciousness of guilt, because at numerous times the story changes, like, oh no, if I didn't have anything to do with it. And it's like, oh, I'll take responsibility for it. It's like, that's not what your actions are saying. It's a very easy and very universal saying. Actions speak louder than words. And the defendant's actions since the crime has led law enforcement, prosecution, only to one direction. That the defendant is the one who committed this heinous act and tried to cover it up, and has tried to basically pin the blame off. That is like, oh, I didn't do it. Or if I did, maybe I wasn't in my right mind. What I can tell you, this is not a case that's going to have any jury appeal whatsoever. It's not even going to have jury appeal at sentencing. It's just going to be, is there going to be one juror who potentially is of the belief that's like, I don't know if I think it's just a case that ends in life in prison without parole. It's possible something else, but the facts are just too heinous. It is gruesome. It is aggravating. It is unforgivable. And I don't think the defense is going to be able to use anything from that video to their advantage. This whole case is as bad as the defense case as you can humanly get.
No, I think you're right. When the jurors' sympathies are probably most high when it's a completely innocent victim, and you have the most innocent of victims when you're talking about a toddler. Then that toddler's life is taken at the hands of their own parent. And then the reason for it just appears to be the parent being selfish and drug fueled and everything else. There's not anything about this that seems to be, at least from an emotional perspective, to be mitigating. I agree with you. One thing, though, that the prosecution is doing here that I sometimes see this happen and I don't quite understand it. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts as a former prosecutor, but they've charged her with 19 different counts. This is a murder case. What are we doing? I charge her with murder. If you want to charge, the disposing of the body in some alternative way or something like that, I might be able to see that argument. But why the overkill in all of these charges? And my question is, do you think that might backfire? Might it weaken their case? Might it slow down their case? They're not going to have 19 jury instructions that have to be given and 19 different sets of elements that have to be proved and all this time wasted on arguing all of these different counts. What are your thoughts on that?
So when I first joined the state attorney's office as a law clerk, one of the cases I worked on was the baby Chance case. Chance Walsh was a infant who was killed by their parents. We had a recording of them beating the child. And it's interesting you talked about charge stacking. So when I was on the case, I was like, why do we have all these charges on it? And it's like, we got the individual on murder. It's because you charge stack when you're not entirely sure. I think the prosecution is fearful that a jury might see through the holes in their case. It's not remember, the kind of the open and shut case, the ironclad case, it does not exist in criminal law. As much as people believe it is, and it's like, oh, it's open and shut, it's like it's a no-brainer. And that doesn't exist. And if I'm hearing all these low-level felonies and misdemeanors, that tells me that they are hedging in this case, that they're fearful. Maybe they don't get them on murder. Maybe their evidence isn't that strong, but we know we can get her on 18 other charges. And if we play it right, the judge could decide, like, we're just going to make these consecutive, and it probably end up her doing 40, 50 years, and we didn't even need to prove the murder. So when I see charge stacking like this, I think it's a little bit of a hint that the prosecution subtly believes their case isn't as strong as it should be, and at a good defense attorney could poke some serious holes into it.
Well, you laid out the perfect segue to my last question, which is the prosecution admitted in their opening statements that they do not know, they cannot provide a cause of death in this case, and that is a gaping hole that they have. They have theories that they're going to present, but apparently that was never nailed down by the medical examiner. Is that maybe where this is all coming from? Do you think that's going to present problems, and that's why we're getting this count stacking, as you call it?
So in 2011, the world was shocked by the Casey Anthony verdict. And that was a case that everybody who's listening is familiar with. And the reason she was acquitted, you could say, Jose Baez did an exceptional job, this, that, and the other. That case was decided because the medical examiner testified that they could not say how Caylee Anthony died. That fact that was admitted into evidence, that is reasonable doubt. It's like, was it an accident? It very well could have been. And we can't overcome that burden. So the prosecution, by, like I said, doing this charge stacking and admitting in opening statements like, we don't know for sure, they are admitting reasonable doubt. And by adding all these charges, they're like, if the jury says, well, we don't know if it was murder, we don't know if it was an accident, We don't know what was going on, but we do know that the defendant committed 18 other felonies for sure, and we'll feel better knowing that we're not going to allow this defendant off scot-free. So I definitely think that's where that is going.
Yeah, you might be right. Well, that case looks to be wrapping up soon. We may be hearing closing arguments on it this week or early next week. So again, another case that we will continue to keep our eyes on. But let's finally move to Canton, Georgia, where a woman accused of killing her husband of 38 years may be undone by her adult children after their testimony in her ongoing murder trial. Melody Farris has been charged with felony murder in the death of her husband, Gary Farris, after his remains were discovered burning in a fire on the couple's property in July of 2018. Initially, authorities thought the man's death could have been caused by natural causes, but the investigation quickly changed directions after the discovery of a bullet in one of Farris's ribs. Prosecutors claimed that Farris's relationship was on the rocks and that Mrs. Farris was angered her husband, freely gave money to her adult children while withholding it from her. The woman's defense has refuted that narrative, even pointing the finger at one of the couple's adult children, claiming that her son, Scott Farris, was the only one in possession of the type of ammunition used to shoot Mr. Farris and the only one capable of moving the man's 300-pound body. Scott took the stand against his mother, tearfully testifying that he had nothing to do with his father's death. His sister Melody then followed suit, testifying that her mother was having an affair and noting the woman's odd behavior following the death. As the family drama unfolds, it'll be up to a jury to determine the fate of Farris, which could have major implications on the future of Mr. Farris's sizable estate. What do you think, Matt, of this defense strategy of implicating the son here? There is something to work with, I will say, as far as the caliber of bullets and him having access to that. But you always got to read the room. Do they feel like they're scoring points with the jury here by blaming it on the son? Or is that just, all fair in love and war?
I definitely think that it is by far their best avenue. TV show The Practice. They were always, when they were trying to defend a case, there was always plan A, which was reasonable doubt. And then there was plan B, which was they blame it on somebody else. Reasonable doubt probably doesn't work here, especially when your children are about to testify, you're having an affair, your odd behavior. And then it's like, all right, I think she just wanted to get out of this marriage and get all the money associated with this and start over with her new boyfriend or whatever. So when you have like the son, it's like, okay, well, he's the one who could have done it. He's of the size to be able to carry the body. He has the same ammunition to be able to done it. That is a reasonable assertion to make and a reasonable defense that a jury might be like, it's possible. We can't eliminate that possibility. However, it's going to turn into whose credibility do you believe more? The son took the stand, and from what I understand and what I saw, he bawled his eyes out on the stand saying he didn't actually do this. And he's not on trial here, and he's pouring his soul out to the jury to be like, I'm not the one who did this. The fact that somebody could even think that I did this, it felt genuine, what he was saying. So when the jury's doing that was exceptionally powerful. And then you add it to your own children testifying against you, basically being like, she's having an affair. Since this happened, it wasn't what we were seeing was not grief, was not shock. It was not sadness. It was, oh crap, am I going to eventually be implicated in this? Did I not actually get away with what I thought was the perfect crime? So I definitely think that the defense has something to play with, but I think credibility will play a huge role in it. And from what I saw, the defendant's children were exceptionally credible and did not seem like they had an axe to grind, even though they have possibly a motive, given that they would become the beneficiary of this estate. As we know from old property laws, like you cannot inherit money if you are found to be the cause of the individual's death.
Yeah. Wow. Great points. One thing that you said in there has me thinking too, in these cases, when we see these all the time, it seems like the majority of the cases we're talking about is interfamily violence, husband killing wife, wife killing husband. Usually when the children testify, a lot of times, I should say, not all the time. I know people are going to point out all the exceptions, but a lot of times it seems like they kind of are caught in this world in between. They don't want to believe that the one parent is responsible, and at the same time, they want to be loyal to the parent that was killed. Here you've got parents or children who are clearly testifying against their mother. I mean, it seemed to me as though they believe her to be responsible and are testifying in such a way, not that they're lying, but they're being helpful to the prosecution. And then add to it, the one son is even trying to defend himself against the mother's accusations. How do you think that's going to be viewed by the jury, that the children have turned against their other parent this way?
So what the defense is going to have to do is they're going to have to make it seem like the kids have an axe to grind with the mom. I was like, oh, they were in the midst of a dispute of the estate, and it's easier because instead of the mother getting everything, the kids only have to split it a third. That's how you defend it, and that's how you have to kind of portray it to the jury. The problem is that you need people who are just even a little bit uncredible, unlikable. And by these children testifying against your mother, and the way that they did it, it was cold. It was also filled with emotion at the same time, because it's like, this is really difficult for us. It's like, it's really difficult for us to comprehend that the person who brought us into the world took our father away from us. And us being here should tell you all that you need to know about how we view who we think is responsible, because we're the ones after the death of our father, seeing her at the funeral, seeing how she's acting, seeing how she doesn't seem like she's grieving. She looks like she's almost relieved. All of that is a very important testimony, and things that when you testify, you just can't fake. Some things you just can't lie about. And I definitely think that's what the jury is going to be looking at. It's like, it's so difficult to actually believe that this is true. And the fact that they're being here should tell us all that we need to know as members of the jury.
Yeah, these cases are no clear-cut answers. I mean, you can really sit here and look at both sides of it for hours. But Matt, that is why we love hearing you break everything down. Thank you so much for coming on this week and helping us, giving us some new perspective on these cases. Where can people find out more about you?
Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Tympanick Law.
Fantastic.
And on my website, www.tympanicklaw.com.
Fantastic. Do yourselves a favor. Check it out, everybody. I am your host, Josh Ritter. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Joshua Ritter ESQ or at joshuaritter.com. And if you want to hear my thoughts and coverage on even more true crime cases, you can also check out my brand new YouTube channel, Courtroom Confidential. And of course, you can find all of our Sidebar episodes wherever you get your podcasts. And we want to hear from you. If you've got questions or comments you'd like us to address, please tweet us your questions with the hashtag TCN Sidebar. And thank you for joining us at the True Crime News Sidebar.